Hi, everybody. I am Tiffany Ricks at HacWare. Thank you for joining our secure code streaming. Every month, we try to provide a free resource to developers to understand the best security code practices on various topics. And today, we're going to talk about how to secure your microservices. Microservices is a topic that is continuously evolving in this space. And I'm going to share today, why companies are using microservices. And then I'm going to share the top three poor practices with regard to microservices. And then I'm going to share after that a tool that I found, a open source tool that I found that you could use to make sure that you're securing your microservices. But we're really going to focus on, because microservice is a broad topic, but we're going to narrow in on OAuth and how that impacts your microservices. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Thank you so much for joining. So let's jump right in. All right. So, first and foremost, we always, every time that we provide a tech talk, a tutorial, we give you the how-to instructions on how to do that. And so you can find them on our blog at resources.hackware.com. And you'll see the one that we posted about securing your microservices. This is our secure coding talk. And so here you can see we are going to go through everything that we're going to talk about today. We give you a how-to instruction on what to do at home or in your work environment. And so what I want to show you here is the difference. What do I mean if you are new to coding? What do I mean about microservices and a monolithic architecture? So a monolithic architecture it's a older concept, but many companies are still building that way. And if you look at the screen here, it's basically where you put everything all in one architecture. You don't separate anything out. Everything is developed and fully integrated together in one architecture. And so you got the user interface, the business layer, the business logic, the modeling layer, which is what I usually call the database. All of that is all in one architecture. And for some purposes, it made sense, but we started migrating away from that because you now have one point of failure. If that architecture goes down, everything goes down. And then also, if you want to iterate and make changes, when you have something that's tightly coupled, it makes making modifications extremely difficult, which makes moving and innovative and being more inventive very slow. So in the software world, we started moving towards the microservices, or some call it a service-based architecture. And that's where everything has its own job. Everything is it's what I like to say, it's decoupled. And so if that one thing fails, or if you take it away, the other things that are a part of that environment still works as it should. And if it fails, that thing won't fail. It will elegantly continue to try to do something else. It's more fault tolerant. And so you're able to really have a scalable solution when you focus on the microarchitecture. You can learn more about that. This isn't a class on microservices, but I wanted to explain that for some of our individuals who may be new to coding. And then, so what I want to share with you are poor practices. But before we get into that, how do all of these microservices communicate? Typically in two ways. typically you have something that is authorizing, authenticating, and then authorizing access, and that's OAuth, and that's where we're going to spend a lot of our time today. But then also you have when you're transferring data and these microservices may need to communicate, then you could use JWTs. Some people pronounce them JOTs. I like to say JWTs. And so they use those to help the microservices communicate with each other. So poor practices with microservices. As a developer, the top 3 things that developers should be doing better is making sure that everything should be encrypted. When you are communicating on the web, and if you're communicating through internal microservices or you're communicating through a third party, you should be encrypting this data in motion, and you shouldn't be sending anything plain text. So you should be communicating over HTTPS. There should be SSL communication, and the data should be encrypted. And so there's various ways that you can encrypt your data in transit when you're using, your JSON, when you're using JSON tokens or JSON data, that data is encrypted. JWT, your data is typically encrypted, as well as making sure that you're communicating over a secure protocol. The second thing that you should do when you are securing your microservices, again, when you are transferring data, making sure that there is a token that gives you authorization to communicate. So when you are using these microservices, that these services are looking for a token, there's an expiration date on these tokens, and then you should be in the practice of using refresh tokens to get your to be able to get a new token when it is expired. It's really important too when you talk about architecture to architecture. You could extend the time with those tokens, but I always recommend always use the minimum. So when you are putting an expiration date, make it as short as possible, but use those refresh tokens as a way to give yourself a new token. But that is a best practice on making sure that you are securing your microservice. And then the last, but not least, thing that you should do with regard to OAuth is those redirection URLs. Those redirection URLs could expose your microservice to a vulnerability, because maybe you aren't explicitly defining those URLs and you are trying to create a dynamic URL that you can reuse time and time again. When you're creating these dynamic redirect URLs, you could be allowing also a threat actor to utilize those URLs for their malicious intent. So I recommend, and what we're explaining here in our blog is make sure that you have strict rules about your redirection URL. And we have a tool that I'm going to show you how you can test to make sure from a OAuth standpoint that you are configuring the that resource effectively. And so the one that we're going to spend our time talking about today, it's an open source tool. It's a tool. I'm always looking for frictionless ways for us as developer to intertwine cybersecurity into our development practices. We're busy. We don't have time trying to become cybersecurity experts. So we always have to try to find easy ways to make sure that we are building with cybersecurity accountability. So this tool is a tool that I found. It's called HacWare, and you can find it in Git. On our blog, we have a link to it right there. But HacWare is a cool dynamic OAuth scanner. It's scanning for security purposes. And so I'm going to show you how you can use that to make sure that when you are using OAuth, and I'm talking about OAuth 2.0, that it is set up correctly. And so the first thing when you're building with this open source resource is it relies on Go. And so the prerequisite is that you need to make sure that you install Go on your environment. And then once you install Go, the setup process is really easy. You'll download OAuth from GitHub, and then we walk you through how easy it is to set up. And so once you do that, you'll type go build, and after that, then you can start the scanning process. And the scanning process is super simple and easy. You tell it how you tell it where to look. So you give it the details on how to test your OAuth resource, and from there, then you can give it a number of timeouts. So you can say after 4 tries, then timeout. And then another cool thing is if you don't give it any rules, it will test your OAuth with basic and the simple known issues. It will test that. But if you give it rules, which is what I'm showing you here, one rule you can give it is to test the redirection URL, which is a huge security vulnerability. And so what I'm showing you in this example here is, let's see, does this one? Yeah. So what I'm showing you here is how to set up that rule. And what it's doing is we're giving it rules on how to test the redirection URL to make sure that it is implicitly defined and it's not supporting any of these dynamic pitfalls. And so this is a really easy way. And then after that, you'll tell it where to find that that check. So you can give it custom checks, which is custom rules on how to test your OAuth resource. I am going to, now one thing I do want to let you know, just as a warning, because we are cybersecurity professionals here at HacWare. This is an open source resource. And so I found it, I looked it over. I'm really particular about really looking over a third party's code to make sure that I'm not exposing my organization to a vulnerability. So, this resource is asking you to give, client ID, secret keys to test the OAuth resource. So I am telling you, do your own research into this open source tool to make sure that it is secure and that you feel comfortable putting your credentials in here. And so I want to show you an example of how it works. And I'm using just the default template that it gave me, where we're going to put in the authentication URL. And what it's going to do is it's going to open up the browser. It's going to try to put in my keys and my credentials. But since I'm using the test template, it's not going to work 100%, but I'm going to show you an example of how it would work in the report it would give you. So after you have Go installed and you've ran Go build, which builds this infrastructure, then I'm telling it to look in this configuration file, which is a test file. And let me show you what's in this file. So same thing here. I have my redirection URL. I have a client ID. I have my secret key. I have my authentication URL. And then I am going to run it. And so hopefully you can see that it displays. Yeah, so it opens up the browser. If I gave it the true credentials, it would authenticate, and then it will show this report here. So it gives you a report and it tells you if it passed the default rules, if you didn't give it any, it will tell you that it passed, or if it failed, it will tell you how it failed. Or if you gave it custom rules, it will show you that in this report. So it's a cool little handy tool to help you understand how best to test your OAuth resource. And, when we talk about, so here's the HacWare Security Training API. We help developers build intelligent, smart security training applications. And I'm showing you here how, when you're communicating with your OAuth microservices and you're using OAuth to authenticate, then you use JWT to communicate to those microservices as well as to a third-party API, how you have to still go through that authentication process to get to those resources. And you want to make sure, as a best practice, to make sure that those tokens are expiring and that you are utilizing the refresh token. And so that's something that you also want to make sure when you're securing your microservice, when you're communicating with a third party, you're doing your due diligence to make sure that those tokens are refreshing and that they're valid. And so if you aren't a developer on the HacWare platform, you can go to hacware.com/dev and you can see more about how to build with us. This is all that we have. I am going to provide a link to this service in the comments. To this tutorial in the comments, where you can really utilize, and learn how you can protect your microservices. And if you have any more requests, thank you so much to the developers that requested this topic. They wanted to learn how you can secure your microservice, and I hope that this was helpful. And so if you have any other suggestions and requests that you want to hear from us and our team, you can reach out to us. Twitter is the best place. You can reach out to us at twitter.com/hackware1 to request and interact with our community, as well as reach out to us at hello@hackware.com. If you want to connect with us, ask us any questions. We're here to support the developer community, and we would love to hear your feedback. And we have other videos that you can watch. If you look at our YouTube channel, we have a playlist for secure coding where you can see all of our previous episodes. This is all that we have this week. Thank you for your time. Spread love. Bye.